Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this one is going down the AAS Journal Scientific Editor Series. And I am very happy to have Darin Ragozzine with us today. Hello, Darin.
Hello.
Hey there. Darin, what's your geolocation? Where are you located at?
Sure. I'm a professor at Brigham Young University that is in northern Utah, so not far from Salt Lake City.
Very good.
And I guess the easiest thing is that we had the DPS here in 2016, I think,
Okay.
here in Provo. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and you got a DPS meeting coming up in well, a little bit north in Boise.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Not too
Neighbor,
far,
the
but yeah.
neighbor. And we're
Yeah.
kind of
That's,
neighbors. We're separated by a few hundred miles. I'm down here in
yeah.
Phoenix.
I
Um,
guess that's true. Yeah.
so it's Western US.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Very cool. And Darren, what do you like to do for research?
Yes, so my main area of research is in planetary science. I'm a dynamicist, planetary dynamicist, mostly working on exoplanets around other stars and their dynamics. I was part of the Kepler science team that was right at the time of my postdoc, and so then also I'm working on outer solar system objects. So I work on dynamics of trans-Neptunian objects, binaries especially, and yeah, that's been my main research area. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. And of course that kind of goes along with the motif over behind your head there on those constellations.
Sure.
Those are
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
Those are awesome.
Yeah, I've got Cygnus the Swan, the Little Dipper. Let's see. Andromeda and Boötes, and they all have a significance to me. So,
Very good.
Cygnus is the main constellation of the Kepler field. So I did a lot of work with Kepler.
Nice, nice.
The Little Dipper has the North Star, kind of a central.
Yeah, guide myself.
Uh, Andromeda is the princess. My wife's name is Sarah, and Sarah means princess in Hebrew. So
Oh, very
it's sort
nice.
of like it's like her represented there. And then I work a lot on the dwarf planet Haumea, and Haumea was originally discovered in Boötes. So
Very
that's
cool. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. That was wonderful.
the
So of the research projects that you've done, what do you think has been the most surprising find or the most surprising thing about it, perhaps?
Oh, let's see. So I had the great privilege of being involved in the early Kepler mission results.
Oh,
And, nowadays it's like, oh yeah, here's a system of four transiting planets. At that time, that was like completely unheard of.
yeah.
There were no systems with multiple transiting planets known before Kepler, zero. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so it's like, oh wow, we have two transiting planets in the same system would be like a huge deal. And now there are so many six transiting planet
Yeah, yeah,
systems
yeah.
that we can't even remember them anyway. So that was a huge thing. And then
Oh yeah.
um,
That was a
and it
tsunami.
came up because there's this population of planets that are really close in, um, uh, you know, um, that we kind of knew about before Kepler, but didn't really, certainly not before it was being designed, but kind of were noticing of radial velocities around that same time. And so anyway, the number of systems of multiple planets and their orientations and things like that, that was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really
Very
exciting.
cool. Yeah, that classifies as a good surprise.
Yeah, yeah,
Very good.
yeah.
Very cool. So, while you were, so was your very first AAS journal article associated with that, or had you published in the journal?
No, my first AAS Journal article was Ragozzine and Brown, 2007. It was on the recently discovered Haumea family.
Okay.
And it was we had the discovery of the Haumea family that ended up being a Nature paper, and then my paper was about the dynamics of the family and finding more family members and things like that, kind of a follow up. And that was also a big surprise. Well, maybe not a surprise. I don't know. Um, yeah, I think a surprise because there were known asteroid families, objects
Hmm.
that are on similar orbits that have similar things. But if you take that same physics and translate it to the Kuiper Belt, it doesn't work nearly as well.
Yeah.
But the idea that there would be clusters of objects, I think, was probably not too unusual, but it was really fun to do the first dynamics paper on the first family in the outer solar system. So
Very cool. Nice. Nice. We're gonna find that article and we're gonna put a link to it in the description below.
sure, sure, yeah.
Check that out, people. Very cool. So that was in 2007? Yes.
Yes, yeah.
And so what have you sort of done since then, to the current epoch and as far as publishing as an author goes?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so continue to have, I still am pretty much half and half exoplanets and TNOs. And so um, and so have continued to publish papers all along those lines. A lot of focus on Haumea specifically, outer solar system binaries. Those papers have usually been with small groups, me and my students, me and one collaborator, something like that. And then I've also had the experience of being on these Kepler mission papers with, 100 co-authors, some of the big papers, and being 40th co-author on 40 papers is a little bit of a different, type of experience as well.
Feel,
So
yes, to it,
yeah,
yeah.
so I
It's a
definitely
large
had that.
collaboration.
I've kind of had both sides of that, and that's been interesting. It's actually there's a bit of a cultural difference even between the planetary science community and the astrophysics community in
Okay.
terms of co-authorship. So the astronomy community tends to be a little bit more inclusive. Oh,
Okay.
sure, you helped observe one night, you're a co-author, right? And planetary science community is a
Phenomenal.
lot more circumspect with that. I'm not saying one is right or
Oh, it's
wrong,
just
just
different communities.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, but these communities are merging.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
an interface now, and I've actually seen a case where there was some friction because of this different perceptions, philosophies about publications in the two fields. So anyway.
Diffusion is a slow process.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah, root of time. Yeah. So
Just to be nerdy about it.
yeah, sure. That's fair.
Yeah, and speaking of your students, I just yeah, we did a video on with your student Ben Proudfoot just not too long ago, and
That's
we
right.
a link in that video in the description.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice article. Very cool. So at some point, as you were going along on that trajectory, somehow you decided to be a scientific editor. And why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, sure. I'm one of the newest scientific, not youngest, the newest scientific editors.
There we
Might
go.
be youngest too, I don't know. But yeah, academically youngest scientific editors. I only started about a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
And about a year and three quarters ago or so, I found out through, there was one of the AAS emails, there was uh, I don't know, a blurb or a link or an ad or something, or a
Yeah,
proto ad for
cool.
hey, we're looking for scientific editors,
Good.
which is probably not a particularly effective way to find things because we don't always read every word of every AAS email,
No, no, no. You read it
right?
rapturously.
There's a lot of content there. But anyway, I saw that, and I've always loved. I love reading papers. Um, I I enjoy giving feedback to other people. Um, uh, I'll say I have a talent, I think, for reading and understanding papers quickly. It's
Yeah,
something that I can read and kind of, I mean, um, skim, read,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
uh,
There's various levels in which one
I'm
reads.
not saying I'm extraordinary, but I'm above average, I think, probably for the field.
Good,
So,
good,
and so
good
yeah,
quality.
so I love reading papers. I would regularly read all the new papers on archive and well, all the new papers. You can't read all of
It's a
it.
little large these
Even
days.
within
But there
even
was
within
a
a
point in
subset.
time where you could do that.
Yeah, well, yeah. Even now, even just all exoplanet papers is too much.
Large. Yeah.
Can't read that.
Well, that field really branched out and exploded.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so I love reading papers. I like the idea of being an editor. In our I'm a faculty member. A lot of professional astronomers are, or at other institutions where some kind of professional service is
Hmm.
expected, right? Is
Yep.
anticipated, and I really subscribe to the idea that there's a lot of different kinds, and so you should do one that you like, right? So you
Yes.
should, so this was one that I was like, oh, I think I would enjoy being a scientific editor more than say, being the chair of the DPS or something like that. Not, I mean, so super grateful to all those people.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just,
yeah. No, no,
different
there's no
different
diss
personality
there.
types,
There's no
right?
diss there. No, 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 no.
Yeah, no, certainly not. So
Understood.
I was like, oh, okay, like, so anyway, so it seemed to be a good match, and then it wasn't too long, and Ethan, our editor in chief, asked if I would go ahead and be a scientific editor, so that was
Cool.
good.
Very cool. Um, and sometimes people wonder, what exactly does a scientific editor do? So it's sort of like,
Right.
maybe a day to day or week to week, whatever or maybe it's multiple periodicities.
Sure,
What does
yeah.
a scientific editor do?
Yeah, so the idea is to start with a manuscript that is submitted by someone in our field, and to end up with a published paper,
That's
that's
cool.
referenced and cited, right, and all those things, right? That's the whole process, and so there's many aspects to that process. We have logistical aspects to that process, like where do you upload, like what's the email address of every author, all
Uh,
those kinds of things. And we have an
yes.
excellent staff that works through a lot of those pieces. Then there's the overall making sure that the article is consistent with the goals of the journal, the intent of the journal, and usually um, the first interaction with the content of the article by a scientist is done by actually the lead editor, who takes a look and then says, "Yep, this looks about right," and assigns it to a scientific editor. So, a
Right.
scientific editor, my role is to ensure the scientific content and integrity of the manuscripts that we have. Um, Understanding that that we do that at a very imperfect level with an
Yep.
imperfect process, right? But
Humans,
that's the intention, right?
humans
That's
are
that's
involved.
right. Yes, humans are involved, and science is self-correcting, so it's not crucial to get every single paper 100% perfect, right? That's okay. We have it's the cumulative um,
Effect.
bulk that is more meaningful than any individual paper. But we do want to make sure the individual papers are good too.
It's
And
possible.
so, yeah, so the scientific editor is the one assigned to your paper who will take it, identify one or maybe more reviewers, send it to the reviewers, and then they are the one who sort of arbitrates the process of discussion between the authors and the reviewers, the
Nicely
peer
phrased.
reviewers.
Nicely phrased.
And then in the end, they make the final decision on the scientific content, which is 99.9% of the time the decision about whether it's published or not in the AAS Journals.
Yeah. Very good. Very cool. Very good.
Yeah, so when you hear the words accept or revise or reject, that's me. That's my role is to arbitrate those types of decisions. Yeah.
Well, yep, very good. And what sort of happens sort of on a day to day or maybe
Hmm.
week to week cadence? So like how many new manuscripts do you get per week? And then what's sort of the steady state of manuscripts in some
Sure. Yeah.
process?
That's a great question. Yeah, I probably get about three a week
Okay,
on average. It varies. Something like, yeah,
it
two, three,
does.
four a week, typically, and those have already been looked at by the lead editor, and but I do my own kind of read through, and assign referees. I am working on improving the speed of that process. That seems to be something that,
Okay,
as a new scientific editor, I'm not as adept at as as of the other editors.
a
Anyway,
little more experience. Okay,
so it can take about a week. Well, there's a huge range. Something median,
yeah,
something
there's a
like a
there's a
week.
definite
Um,
spectrum.
to find a reviewer that agrees to provide the review, and then the reviewer takes a few weeks, and so in review there's probably 10 to 15 papers at any time,
Yeah.
waiting for reviewers to
Some
either respond or to
decisions.
provide the review. And then it goes back to the scientists who have time for revisions. And that's also a wide spectrum. There are a lot of people who
Oh yeah.
I will admit I'm a really, really slow reviser. Very slow. So nominally we have a 6 month limit. I personally
Again,
have
there's
gone
a
beyond that
spectrum.
limit.
There's a
So,
spectrum. But we do have an
but
upper bound, right? We have an upper bound, I think, of like 6 months.
Well, so 6 months is the expectation. It's not a strict bound. There
Yeah,
are
true.
we let papers through, and I've had my own papers, gone a little
Personal
longer than that,
experience.
and squeezed through.
Okay.
So anyway, so if there's several sort of months on that, I think I have something like 40 papers in revision somewhere,
Yeah.
something like that.
Okay.
So
Wow.
well, yeah, I'd have to look. We have a really nice software system that kind of shows all the information to us. So that's not when they're under revision or under review. I'm usually not paying that close of attention to it because that's sort of, someone else has the ball,
Oh,
as it
right.
were,
Their
and
ball.
is working
Right.
on it.
Right. Right.
So yeah, so that kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so my day to day is, maybe getting a new paper, finding a reviewer. Most of my day to day is checking in on potential reviewers. Oh,
Yes.
I emailed you 2 days ago. I haven't heard from you. Okay, this person
Mm-hmm.
declined. I need to find look for another reviewer. So
Mm-hmm.
that's most of my time.
Mm-hmm. That is, I would agree. In my experience, that's the most time consuming part. Sometimes it
Yeah.
happens within a minute and you go, oh, good.
Yeah. Yes.
Sometimes it takes weeks.
I have had a couple recently that, well, and again, since I'm new,
Yeah.
I'm just now exploring the edges of the distribution, right?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. But those edges,
I recently
other
had one
people
that,
have experienced those edges. Yes. They can
I
go out
recently
for
had
quite
one
a
that
bit.
it took weeks to
Yeah.
get a reviewer, and
I think my
so I guess
personal
for those
record
watching who are authors, it's
patience.
not a Gaussian,
Patience.
it's more
It's
like
a
a
long tail.
Poisson. Yeah, there's a long tail.
Um,
I think the thing that's interesting too and worth pointing out is it really doesn't have much to do with the content of the paper. It's not like, oh, this paper, like, oh, we'll never. It's just who's busy or the James Webb deadline's next week or whatever, right? So
yes.
it's a variety of things. So
Yes.
if you
All
find
valid.
yourself in the tail of the
All
distribution,
valid.
it's not a comment on the scientific value of your paper. It's just
No.
the distribution. Yeah. So
Yep. In the sampling. Very good.
yeah.
Good.
Right.
So when that oh yeah, and we should say that most of the papers you handle are for the PSJ, the Planetary Science Journal.
No, actually, I do most of my stuff for, well, I guess they end up in the Astronomical Journal. So
Okay.
I do mostly exoplanets.
Okay.
I do
Okay.
almost all exoplanets.
Okay. That is it.
Um,
Okay. I'm good.
and that's just mostly a supply and demand um, type thing. They really needed a new SE who was connected to exoplanets, and so there's a lot of exoplanet stuff. But PSJ is growing, and so
Yes.
I may start doing more for them as well.
Very good. So let's talk a little bit about when you get one of those new manuscripts per week or so, or 3 or 4 per week, as it may be. So when you first give it a read, what do you think makes for a good, solid initial submission?
Sure. Um,
Because that
I'll
always
start by saying the vast majority are great.
okay.
We have the AAS Journals has such a history. Most people who are submitting to us have read several articles from our journals already. And so there's kind of an understanding of what it is, and most submissions are already basically
Good
our
shape.
excellent initial submissions.
Yep.
When I do see deficiencies, occasionally I will see something where um, uh, sometimes for non-native English speakers, the English
Mm, mm,
there's some English grammar things. Unless it's it doesn't have to be perfect, because in my role is again the scientific piece, and so as long as it's scientifically reviewable, right? As long as a
right.
reviewer
Right.
can read it and assess the science, I care. I
Give
don't
a
care much
little
about
language.
details
Yeah.
of grammar or things like that.
Right.
But sometimes it's not quite that. And I have occasionally had papers where um, uh, I wanted to ensure that the content and the contribution of the paper would be significant, novel, these types of expectations that we have for journal articles. So I've
Right.
occasionally reached out
Cool.
to authors about this, but the most of the time it's quite good. Um, yeah.
Okay. Um, okay. So the paper comes in. One may spend anywhere from a minute to several weeks securing an appropriate referee. And then the report comes. And so do you have any guidance or tips for authors about the review process itself?
Yeah. Let's see.
What's
Um,
a reasonable reply and what's not?
Sure. The author replied to the referee report. Is
For
that what you want
example.
me? Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Again, I will say, at least in exoplanets and the papers I review, most of the time they're very good. I have had a few people try to. So we encourage that you respond, point by point,
Yes.
um, um,
Yes.
which I might reword a little bit to be like issue by issue, because sometimes, a
Points
single
will be.
paragraph
Yeah.
from the referee might have two important issues in it, and
Mhm.
I think, well, I actually I I'm usually quite careful about ascribing intentions to authors or referees, but sometimes authors will take a single paragraph and only respond to one of the aspects, leaving one of the other main aspects. And that sometimes is challenging because the paragraph will usually start with, here's a major thing that I'm really worried about, and then the last sentence will be about some detail, and then the authors will respond to the last sentence
Did you,
only and
you
not to
skip the main point?
not to the main point. So
Right.
you want to understand what the reviewer is reading,
Getting.
or sorry, what the reviewer is trying to communicate.
Right.
I think for me, one thing that really helped me as an author and appreciating reviews is that a reviewer is a reasonably good a starting point as a sample of a reader, right? And so if
Hmm.
your reviewer didn't understand why you skipped method X, then that's might be something that readers multiple readers will
They
worry
want to
about.
know.
Yeah, right. So
Right.
so so yeah, so I think there's that. I think the other thing that I would recommend to authors is don't be afraid to instead of changing your analysis or changing your text. I think changing your text usually makes sense for the reason that I just said, right? If the
Clarity.
reviewer thinks that this is an issue,
Clarity.
add a couple sentences about that,
Right.
for every issue. I think that's usually pretty
A
a good
lot.
practice.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid to provide a rebuttal. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to say,
Absolutely. One could.
I don't think that this is a relevant part. I think sometimes they worry that the editor is going to um,
Oops.
maybe that the editor will always side with with the reviewer,
Hmm.
which we get a review for a reason, right?
Right.
We have an expert, who's giving a comment, and so I won't, uh, if an expert says this is an issue, I'm listening to that.
Particularly if
But
it's a technical.
it doesn't mean that I'm going to side with them when some discussion comes up. So I think, and I think especially that's for our junior, our junior authors who maybe aren't as used to this. It's okay to push back a little bit
Yes.
in your response to the review,
Yes.
and uh, and then the reviewer might. might push back, and so and then it usually doesn't lead to. It usually doesn't asymptote to infinity. Eventually, eventually something happens.
Well,
But
that's where the scientific editor comes in, right? They're,
and the
okay,
scientific editor's
okay.
role is to
We need a decision.
reach that point.
Right. The idea is to
But yeah,
avoid that point.
yeah, right. It's to avoid the infinite regress.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. I think the providing some rebuttal is a perfectly reasonable way. A rebuttal with a little bit of text to help explain that
Get
can
a
be
rebuttal.
sufficient.
Right, exactly. Yeah, very good. How about on the other side of the coin? There's referees who are putting time and effort into reports.
Yeah.
And do you have any guidance for referees on their reports?
Yeah, sure. Let me start with thanking referees in general. I
Yes,
now that I'm a scientific editor, I kind of, you know,
appreciate.
trying to, well, that too, but I'm also kind of learning more about this type of position. There are some fields where they have literally spiraled completely out of control with respect to reviewers. No one will review.
Oh,
People are
those.
getting multiple review requests a day. It's just like literally like ground to like grinding to a halt. So we are not in that situation. We have a very healthy community that is very open to reviewing and things like that.
Mhm.
So I'll also mention that for myself, when I think of reviewers, I'm trying to find people who probably would have read the paper really closely anyway,
Yeah.
right? Who are, it's not something that's like a side tangent for them. It's, reading this paper is something that they probably would have done anyway. And so there's that. And then I think you know, the other process, the other thing to let reviewers know is that yeah, that their feedback is valuable. I I sometimes I sometimes think about what maybe, well, I guess not perceived. It's a real power differential, right? So I apparently have all the power to accept papers. If you
Yes.
your I personally try to differentiate between your activities as a reviewer and your activities as an author. If you were, if you say no to review, I'm not gonna, make it so it's harder to get your next paper published or anything like that. Those are two separate
Yes.
things. And so again, kind of the same thing that I told the authors, as a reviewer, you can push back against against the editor a little bit and against the authors, and
Yes.
that's okay, right? We want your professional opinion, we want your scientific expertise, we want your ideals, and a good review. I guess another thing that I will say that I have found really helps authors and the whole process. It's nice, and most reviewers do this, but it's nice if you characterize the magnitude and the or importance of the comments that you're making.
Okay.
So if you say, "Oh, the authors should have done the analysis this way," is that like this? So major, moderate, minor, fatal flaw,
Fatal.
suggestion, right? There's this huge range of
Yes.
like,
Yes.
oh, um, and when you communicate the issues, also try to communicate the importance of those issues. Like, they
Yes.
should have done this analysis this way, because that's how I would like to do it. But it's fine if they don't, right, or whatever. Or unless they do it this
Like
way, it will
suggestion.
be,
Or
it will be forever, uncertain whether, they did it right or whatever, right? So communicating the importance of the issues along with
hmm
many scientific issues that you see, with a focus on major
Good.
on major issues.
Good.
Um, and yeah.
Good. Awesome. Very good. Well, that should help a little. Um,
Yeah.
anything else about the peer review process in general, outside of maybe the peer review proper? So, anything
Yeah.
you'd like to add?
Well, I think I'd like to go back a little bit to talking about the finding a reviewer process,
Okay.
and that. And one one option that reviewers have when they decline a review is it's called too busy. And 100%. That's very legitimate. We have many people who are serving our community in other ways, often invisible, right? You might be the dean at your university now, right? Or you might be, other things, right?
Right.
And so I'm not saying you should never hit too busy. If you're too busy, totally hit
You're
too
too
busy.
busy.
Like I support you as a scientist. My goal in asking you to be a referee is not to make you
Absolutely.
dislike being an astronomer, right? It's to do this. So there's that. Um, we can't all be too busy all of the time, and so there's some balance to be had there.
Hmm.
And one thing for me that I'm trying to look at, and that sometime I see again, a distribution, is um, the number of reviews compared to the number of papers published, right?
Yeah.
I'll just mention this idea that if you are if you are actively engaged in the publication process, you should probably occasionally, review a paper too, right? And I'm not trying um, to tell anyone what to do, but but there, this all only works because we have a pretty good balance
Balance.
between the two different types of things.
Right.
And I get that that balance shifts over the course of someone's career, right? Things like that. And so absolutely, if you're too busy, hit the too busy button. That's totally fine. It's
And
nice
what?
if you provide more ideas for other
Yes,
reviewers.
yes, yes, yes,
I love
yes.
that. I think that's one of the things that I was a little surprised about,
Leave a suggestion.
because I've read thousands of exoplanet papers, or at least looked at thousands of exoplanet papers, and so I was thinking like, oh, this would be fine, but as a scientific editor, I get things from all areas of
Okay.
exoplanets, instrumentation, detailed spectroscopy, things that I just that unless it's really in my sub niche of dynamics or something like that, I actually don't know the literature and the people in that field and things like that. And
That's one of
so I really appreciate it when authors provide suggested reviewers, and when if you're not able to review, no problem, totally decline. But give me a couple names of someone that you think would be helpful, and that will just smooth the process for everybody, right? If we,
yeah.
it's not really me, you know.
And sometimes when
I'm a happy scientific editor, if well, me personally, you're not benefiting me personally by doing that. You're helping the authors, right? You're helping the community.
right,
Yeah,
you
right.
move
So
science.
to get
Right.
a faster review, to move things more smoothly. So don't do it for me. Do it for the community, I guess.
Very good. Yes. Yes. And sometimes even with the person you suggest might be unavailable as well. Sometimes it just toggles something in the scientific editor. Oh yeah, that direction. I should have
Right.
gone down that corridor a little bit more. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so sometimes it just opens up avenues that may not have originally come to mind as viable fields.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Very
Totally.
good. All right. Anything else you'd like to say?
Um. I guess kind of in a similar vein, exoplanets in particular is a
Okay.
very fast-moving field.
Yes.
The
Yes.
papers come out fast. We want to try to review them quickly, and things like that. And so one thing that I'm starting to explore a little bit with speeding up this process, is, even though typically I only am looking for one reviewer, asking multiple, maybe two or
Right.
three or something, people at the same time, kind of in parallel.
Yes.
And with the idea that this will expedite the process for the authors. And
Yes.
so, if if I ask you to review and then a day later you get an email saying, "Oh,
Okay. Okay.
I don't need to review," it has nothing to do with you personally. Again,
No,
it
no,
means it means that someone else,
no.
answered my email
I would be
first.
relieved, actually. Oh,
That's what I thought, and so And so I started doing this. We had some discussion at our most recent scientific editors meeting um, about how maybe this is we need to be a little bit gentler with this process of saying, well, we don't need you anyway.
Oh, well, with the content of the message,
In the
yes.
in the process, right? So so anyway, so this is something I'm working on. But what I the main thing I want to communicate to potential reviewers and authors is, you know, not needed doesn't mean you wouldn't have given a great review or we want to hear your review. It just means, you know, we have found another expert and so
Right.
and so we, and
We're trying
so
to keep that load balanced.
yeah, we're just trying to keep the
Load
load
balance
balance
in here.
and kind of expedite it by
Excellent.
going in parallel sometimes. So something
Or
to think about.
sometimes reviews go sideways. You need a second
Sure.
referee. You can always
Yes,
go back to that person and say, hey,
that's right.
interested, maybe not.
Yes, yeah,
And I do find that a number of referees actually reply to those, sorry, we don't need you right now for this one, and they'll reply. Maybe they're on vacation, maybe whatever they're doing.
sure, right, yeah,
Uh, and then I always reply back, give them the personal message and say, yes, okay, I'll keep, if this manuscript needs a second pair of eyes, I'll keep you in mind.
right, yeah, sure, yeah,
Then you do have to go to that second pair of eyes.
occasionally, yeah, sure.
It's a nice little, but I've been practicing doing multiple review asks for quite a while now. And I think I can count on less than one hand the number of times people actually got bent about it. So 10,000 positive experiences, 3 or 4 or 5 maybe negative ones. I'll take that any day of the year.
Yeah, sure, okay, yeah, good to know, yeah.
Yeah. No matter what you do, somebody will be upset at some point.
There's
Yeah.
yes, there's some. I guess it's I'd like to be transparent about what is going on when that happens, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I could do a little bit better at that. But,
Okay. Okay. Cool.
no.
Well, it'll be a good another year and a half or so, or however long. I wish you a happy, long trajectory there.
Yes, thanks. Yeah.
All right. And I think that is a good place to call this one. And Darin, thank you so much for talking about your scientific editor and your research activities. Thanks.
Great. Appreciate it. Thanks, Frank.
And that will do, everyone. And I hope this made your next astronomy paper day a little bit better. And we will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.